You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt Migaki, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Hey folks, how's it going? Welcome to a fresh episode for your ears. Just a quick reminder before we get into today's episode that today, as of when this episode drops, is February the 17th, and it is the last day to enter the contest to win the Fender The Trapper Fuzz. And you do that by trying to help Tepe Teranishi from Thrice try to find his stolen Les Paul. So if you go to Instagram and you type in hashtag find Tepe's Les Paul, you'll see most people have shared the same picture, and that's the picture you should share, is of him playing it with the serial number, which is 824-85530. And so I will be, this week, once this day is over with, I will be randomly selecting somebody who shared that post to win the Fender The Trapper. So, anyways, this episode is for the nerds, and it's very, very educational. I know you're not used to that on this podcast. You're used to mindless blabbering. But today I have Jason Rodgers from Jayemar Guitars and my good friend Justin Porter. We recorded it here in the Shred Shed, and we are learning all about multiscale guitars, something that I didn't really know that much about, but I got to hang out with one of Jason's guitars for a few months. We recorded this back in December, and I just had other things come up to where I needed to drop it now. So it doesn't matter. It's timeless. It's not like the content has expired or anything, but Jason is an amazing luthier, local to me here in the Portland metro area. He makes really, really cool guitars. We talk all about it, so I won't go into too much more detail, but he also used to be a co-host on the Luthierist? Yeah, there, I got it. With Paul Roney, and we talk about that a little bit, and we get into some more, in-depth discussion about multiscale and why it exists and what it does and blah, 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 blah. So, without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Jason Rodgers and Justin Porter. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar tone and the people behind it. I'm your host Blake Weiland, and with me today I have my good friend Justin Porter.
Yo. And
my new friend Jason Rodgers.
Hello.
How's it going, man?
It is going well.
Jason is from Jayemar Guitars, and we're going to talk about why I've been saying it wrong.
It's, I when I think about this, when it comes to like creating a business name, I probably did it all wrong because, when you see like advice on like how do you create a business name, do you do your name? Do you come up with something weird, some kind of word that strikes people? So it's just my initials.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Jason Michael Rodgers, but I spelled it phonetically, and this was something that I got from my father-in-law when he was in he was in Vietnam, but during the Vietnam War he served in Germany, and when he would write letters home to his parents, he would sign them RCY, but he wouldn't put his initials. He would write the word ARESEEWHY.
Okay.
And it was just kind of a weird thing that he did.
I kind of like it though.
So,
I'm into it.
And so when when I first met him, when I first started going with my wife, we'd do email and stuff, and he'd sign his emails that way. He would still sign things like that every now and again. I'm like, why is he doing that? What does that mean? And I asked my wife that, and she explained it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, that's cool. I could do that too. Jayemar, but it doesn't spell any interesting words or anything. It just makes a new word. So it is Jayemar, and my logo is that too.
That was a big tipping point. After Jess said that, I was like, I don't. And I even on the podcast, I was like, I don't know. I'm not really sure what it is. And I was like,
Like I'm pretty sure it's just his initials.
There it is. There it is. It's right there. So when I said Jayemar on Chasing Tone, that was wrong. So
all right.
yeah. So yeah, because I mean we haven't really talked about it. This is not the only podcast I do. I also am a co-host on Chasing Tone with Brian Wampler 99% of the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes he does other things, but it's usually me rambling.
I appreciate you mentioning me even slightly.
Well, it was like, it was like in new gear stuff. What's going on? I'm like, well, I got this crazy guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't we get into your story though? Like, where did you start? When did you first pick up the instrument, and how did you go down this crazy luthier path?
That is a story that stretches out, and it in terms of like playing guitar and getting into guitar, and then eventually getting into luthiery. But I started playing, as a kid. I was like, I think the summer between 8th and 9th grade. That would have been summer of 1990, and I didn't really have anybody I wanted to play like at the time. I was just like, I wanted to play guitar, and my luthiery career and interest is spaced out quite far from where I started playing guitar. I started playing, I was a kid, like between 8th and 9th grade. So, summer of 1990 or so. And I didn't really have any specific guitar player that I wanted to play like. I just knew that I wanted to play guitar. And we had moved to a new town, and I got into the band at school, and I started taking piano lessons from a local lady, and started playing guitar and taking guitar lessons from a local lady. And it just started out with like the Mel Bay book, playing, Hanging on Your Head, Tom Dooley and stuff like that. And it was just on a nylon string guitar. And then there's a guy in my band class who had an electric guitar, and he'd bring it, and you'd go into the band room at lunchtime, and everybody hang out, and this guy could play, like Guns N' Roses and the Slaughter covers and stuff like this. It was awesome. So I started listening to a little bit more rock at that time. Listening to the hair bands, Poison and Motley Crue and Slaughter and Warrant and all those late hair bands that were transitioning into the grunge stuff. Got into Metallica, into Alice in Chains, into Soundgarden a little bit later, but it just, my guitar heroes were it was pretty simple. It was like Slash, Kirk Hammett, Jerry Cantrell,
Right.
Yeah. and it was really hard. I didn't really have much concept of like trying to get to sound like them, because I was playing through like this Korean Strat copy, is something called a Tanara, through this 8-inch Gorilla practice amp, and there was not really much tone going on.
Right.
Yeah.
I just knew that I liked to play with the humbucker, tone wide open, and as much crunch on the amp as I possibly could.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. That's we've all been there for sure.
And I just try. I was in a garage band with my friends. Actually, my friend who makes my straps now, Lon Whittier, with M7 straps. He was bass player in my first garage band, and that's where we learned to play all of our covers and everything. There was never my interest in guitar. Like I always like to take things apart. As soon as I get something new, like I get a new Walkman, the first thing I would do was I'd listen to my favorite cassette tape, and then I would take it apart to like look at all the guts and see what was going on inside of it, and then I put it back together to make sure that it still worked. So I always like to like see what was under the hood of things. And as soon as I got that first electric guitar, I played it for a while, and then I took it apart. I like took every screw, everything like off of that instrument, and put it back together. That was never with any, idea of modifying it in any way or anything like that. It was just like, how does it work?
Right.
What's going on? And I was kind of kid. I always like to take things apart. Like my brothers and sisters would bring me toys that broke, and they would say, "Here, fix this," and I would try to. Sometimes I could, sometimes I couldn't. I could make it better a little bit.
Yeah.
Put some glue on this here, but I I have to tell you, I'm not going to be able to answer one of your last questions about the Boss pedal because I never owned pedals. I could never afford pedals. Like my mom got me a Crybaby for Christmas because Kirk Hammett and Jerry Cantrell played, and I needed that wah pedal to play Man in the Box. You know,
Yeah,
You sure did.
so it was like that was like the extent of my quest for tone. Otherwise, you know, I eventually got a stereo chorus PV amp, and I was happy with like all the settings, you know, all the chorus and the reverb and the 2 channels, everything like that. It wasn't until I got into college, I came to Portland to go to Lewis and Clark, and I started studying jazz guitar with Dan Ballmer. And if you don't know who Dan Ballmer is, he's kind of like Portland's John Scofield. He can like do anything jazz. You know, he's been playing professionally since he was 19 in Portland, and he can do the fusion thing. He can do the straight ahead thing. He just does everything. And that's when I started really kind of paying attention to tone, and I wanted to get this jazz tone. And so, you know, I was playing a Carvin DC 127 at the time, and you know, as soon as I started doing that stuff, I bought a Polytone amp, which is, you know, the requisite jazz amp.
Okay.
You know, it's like this little amp that's got the jazzy marshmallow tone, you know. So you switch to the neck pickup, you roll your tone completely off, and you get that, you know, that really
muffled
gentle,
kind of
muffled, yeah. And you play like Wes Montgomery with your thumb, you know, and you. That's when I really started trying to get into tone. But then, of course, I was playing a solid body. I'm like, what am I doing playing jazz with a solid body? I need an arch top.
It's the only way.
Yeah, and so I started looking around, and so this was like 97, 98. And at that time, the Asian market hadn't improved like it has today. Like you can go into like if this story was happening today, I would have walked into Guitar Center and bought a $500 Ibanez arch top off the wall and been happy with it.
It would have been great.
Yep.
But at that time, even like the Epiphone, you know, Joe Pass Emperor model was still $1,200, and that was just
Really?
so beyond my range. And so I was just like, well, I guess I'll just have to settle with playing electric guitar. And I was playing, you know, it was fine. I was playing in a band in Portland at the time, you know, being the lead guitarist. You know, so I still needed to do that kind of thing, and I couldn't afford to have more than one guitar at a time.
Yeah.
So I was okay with that. But then I was in Powell's Books one day, and I was in the music section, and I was just looking for, and you know, they had biographies, tab books, all this kind of stuff. I was just perusing along, and I found this book, and it's this one right here.
Oh, he brought it.
Making an Archtop Guitar by Robert Benedetto. And
I've actually saw that. I've seen that before. Yes.
Yeah, and I pulled it off the shelf, and I started thumbing through it, and I'm like, this is amazing. There are people like they're just dudes who build guitars, right? So you know, I mean, this time, I mean, I was still, I think in your progression as a guitar playing human consumer of guitars, you probably go through this progression of thinking like all guitars are made in factories.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then at some point in time, you learn about this thing called the boutique market, the underground of boutique guitars.
Yeah, it's dangerous when you find out about
Very
that.
dangerous.
And so this was, if you also think about the time here, so this was, you know, 97, 98. This was when like the internet was just kind of starting to get more accessible. Maybe if you had dial up in your apartment, and you know, you could do web searches and stuff. I was still, you know, searching at school and stuff on their computers.
And it took so long to load a page.
Yeah.
And then you get somewhere you wanted to go and best can't go there.
Yeah. And so I started searching and researching. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's actually a lot of people who do this. And it was, And a couple of years later, I got a subscription to the Guild of American Luthiers quarterly journal called American Luthery. And I kind of realized that this was sort of at this new blossoming of Luthery in America in particular and in the world, where people were getting more connected with boutique instruments, and more people were buying books like Benedetto's book here. Also, this other one here called Guitar Making Tradition and Technology by William Cumpiano and Jonathan Nadelson. Also, Make Your Own Electric Guitar by Melvin Hiscock, with a foreword by Brian May, which is really cool.
There you go.
He's a British guy, obviously. But so these books started coming out. Yeah. These books started coming out. There also began in the late 90s online Luthery forums, like the Musical Instrument Makers Forum,
that
which is
early?
still around.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really?
Okay. I wouldn't have
The
thought that.
original Luthiers Forum came along a little, or the official Luthiers Forum, OLF, came along a little bit later. The Australia New Zealand Luthiers Forum, and then it's just kind of like gone crazy since then. So suddenly, like late 90s, early 2000s, you could get a ton of information about how to build guitars. And, based on my, kind of messing around, taking things apart and seeing how they work. And also my dad's kind of a jack of all trades kind of guy. I helped him finish out 3 rooms in our house, doing framing and electrical and drywall and all that kind of stuff. My dad, he's got this very like problem solving attitude where it's like you can take anything and build anything. Like he built my sister a playhouse out of completely recycled wood.
Nice.
That's awesome.
And my mom likes to refinish antique furniture, like oak furniture, like this piano that you got here with this beautiful oak tiger, figure on it stuff. My mom would find stuff like that in the dump, like tables and chairs, and she'd refinish it. And if it needed a new part, my dad would replicate parts
That's awesome.
So I grew up with this kind of notion of like, well, if you don't have it, you can make it, and you can take things apart and put them back together, and they still work. Yeah. So I could do this. I could totally do this. So a couple of years later, in my apartment in Southwest Portland, I decided I'm going to try to do this. So I went to Gilmore Hardwoods over in Northwest Portland, and I bought some maple and some walnut and some alder, basically enough wood for like a neck through guitar with a quilted maple top. And I started, hacking at this wood on this apartment had a little deck out the back, and I had a router by this time, making noise, trying to do it, in the summer in the middle of the day when nobody was home. And that guitar is the general shape of my Iris model now, that asymmetrical, and it was going to be actually an 8-string Charlie Hunter style guitar in the Novak style with the 3 bass strings and the 5 guitar strings, because I had gotten through my jazz. I kind of got off the archtop thing. I never built an archtop. I probably never will. But I got way into Charlie Hunter and researching all the fan fret stuff that Ralph Novak was doing with the Novak's guitars. And that just really clicked with me. It made a lot of sense. And the Charlie Hunter guitar is the best way to kind of understand it, is that, you have bass and guitar combined together.
I'm not familiar with that, so I'm going to take an internet peek here real quick.
So Charlie Hunter, he's from the Bay Area. Kind of came out in I think it was 93 or so when his first album came out. He was on Blue Note Records. But he was trying to do this thing in jazz. It's called chord melody playing. So you're basically playing melodies and playing chords and bass lines to accompany yourself. So you're kind of like doing everything at once. And he wanted to expand that by stretching the lows and the highs. And so he had this custom guitar built. The first one was a 7-string that he had Novak's build. a Ralph Novak build, and it was just like a couple notes low. It was like a low A and an E or something like that. And then he had another one built that went EAD for the bass strings, and they were labella black tape wound strings, and then ADGBE for the top end of the guitar. And the display of the multiscale, I think it was like 24 3/4 of 25 to like 29 and a half. So it was just like this massive display, right?
Wow.
But you needed to start going into short scale bass range to get those lowest strings to actually work bass range. And so that's kind of what he started doing. And I saw him a bunch when he was first touring. Did a lot of West Coast touring. Probably saw him like 8 or 9 times in Portland. And that made a lot of sense to me. Like, I want to do that. So that first guitar I was trying to build in 2002 was going to be an 8-string like that. And I designed it, and I did all the research with like all the hardware and all the parts and everything like that. Made parts lists, made price lists for everything, because I was going to try to do it as cost effectively as I could. But I got into the woodworking, and I started running into right away the problems of, I mean, there are people that you can make a guitar with like a pocket knife, if you're in dire enough straits and you need to, but I wanted to do it right. And so I had a cordless drill, and I had a router, and that was it, and a couple like chisels and some files and stuff. And I just knew that this was not going to work. And I ended up like making some mistakes with the router, some scary mistakes with the router. You don't want to make mistakes with routers.
No.
They take body parts off in a hurry.
Yes, they sure do. Before you know, they're gone.
Yep.
Yeah. So I made it out with all my fingers and just this desire to really make this work in a better way. Like, I need to start collecting more tools. And it wasn't until we bought our first house in St. John's in North Portland that I had a shop, and I started, I sold a guitar. I sold that Carvin so I could buy a bandsaw. Bought a drill press, got a jointer, got some other tools and things where I could actually shape wood in a way that was going to be accurate and safe.
Right.
So it was about 2008 that I started making sawdust in a real and meaningful way with an actual instrument in mind. We ended up moving in 2009 to where we live now in Lake Oswego on the south side of Portland, and had to like build my entire shop from scratch, like walls, electrical drywall, and everything like that, benches into my garage. And then I started kind of picked up where I left off, and so the 7-string that I brought today was completed in 2014. So it's like, it's really stretched out, this from where I started playing guitar to interest in jazz, to really getting connected with this very specific sound that was jazz, and finding Charlie Hunter and really kind of going down the rabbit hole with that multiscale thing with his instrument, and doing a lot of research to understand what that meant and how that worked. And then, eventually just trying it out myself. So my first guitar was a 7-string multiscale electric guitar. There's nothing like normal or easy about that, all the things that I read for years and years in books and
Start off with a Fender kit.
Yeah, luthier's forums and stuff like that. You're going to want to start with something simple.
Yeah.
Right. It sounds like when Leon was starting Pelican Noiseworks, and I was like, maybe you should start with like a fuzz face or something simple. And he's like, nah.
No.
His first design was the Pelotar, which is like this crazy, complicated fuzz.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's just how he is.
I guess you're a wizard.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's playable. It worked out pretty well. And then based on that, I found out some things about my design that didn't quite work, geometrically in terms of like neck attachment and body bout shapes and things like that. So I changed it. So the black guitar that you have now is sort of the second generation of body shape. And there's a third generation after that changes like the heel, the way where it attaches, The heel is just shaped a little bit differently. Obviously I started making my bridges. I had them made. My very smart friend John Songson, who's a CNC guy in his day job, he helped me with the CAD files and actually made the first round of bridges at his job on the weekend. He went on the weekend and used company tools. He had permission. It was okay.
Yeah.
But
Never done anything like that.
Yeah, Jess has never machined anything on company tools.
No.
Oh,
For my house.
I do the headstock a little bit differently. The headstock transition now, the way that the 0 fret is, and then the string guide nut behind it is different now. And then I so that's my original design, the Iris, and now I have another model that can be either no cutaway or a single cutaway called the Alma. Those are named after my grandmothers, by the way.
Oh, cool.
I like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. There were some pretty sweet ladies who left this world too early. And so just like when I think about them, they were just people of unconditional love,
Yeah.
Just that kind of grandma, and so when I was trying to come up with names for things, just like, this is just the perfect tribute,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's great.
I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, obviously you started off all in on the multiscale thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this was the first time I played some Ormsby's just briefly. My first experience with it was a Strandberg that listener and Tone Mob moderator Jason Fuzzmonger brought to Fear the Riff, and he was like, "You gotta check this out." And I was looking at it, and I'm like, I don't know.
Doesn't
about
look like it's for me.
Yeah, it doesn't look like any of my business. I'm a bit of a traditionalist in my guitar taste.
Yeah.
And I was super also like with the Strandberg, I was like, this neck has angles. Like, what's that? Like, that's not gonna work. I'm used to smooth round necks,
Right.
and it has
Actually,
angles.
so in addition to all the other things that I was trying out with that first 7 string, I actually tried doing a faceted neck on that one.
Uh-huh.
And I found out that I did not like it.
I was like shocked. I was like, this shouldn't be comfortable, but it is. It's fine. Like, it wasn't. I didn't spend enough time with it to really know like how I felt about it, but I was like, I can totally play this.
Yeah.
But visually, I was like, that's not even going to be playable.
Yeah.
Like, is what I thought. And so that was my very, very first time playing anything with multiscale or anything different. And I was like, wow, maybe this is a cool thing. Mm-hmm. Played a couple Ormsby's at NAMM, played your guitars. What was it? Would have been 2 years ago? Or
something like that.
Yeah, Co's one day event. And I was like, wow, okay, this is really something. But it wasn't until you let me borrow this one here, and I've been playing it for little 2 months now or something like that.
Yeah.
I've been playing it really regularly, and I'm like, I'm into this.
Good.
Like, I'm into it. Like, it didn't take what I thought it was gonna take. I thought it was gonna take a major adjustment and like completely change the way I approached the instrument, and it really didn't. I do different things on it because I do different things depending on what guitar I'm playing.
Right.
But I'm like, this. I don't even have to think about it at all.
Well, good.
So it's just I just play it, and it didn't take me a long time to get to that point. It was like after I played it for an hour, like, all right, I can play this guitar now. I mean, as good as I can possibly play guitar, which is not that good. But
you know what you're doing.
No, I don't.
Well, my first experience was at the One Day show when you brought that guitar, and I was just like, I am too stupid for that.
That's
what I thought. Really, like, I don't understand that. And then you're like, no, just sit down and play it. And I was like, all right, fine. And I did, and I was just immediately like, oh, this is actually super comfortable. And it's a lot more welcoming than it seems to a lot of people. And I know a couple of guys in the group kind of said that too when Blake said that you were coming on. They're like, I don't feel smart enough to play it. And I was like, neither did I. But it doesn't take that much to get
you don't
used
have
to.
to be. It's not they look, because they look different.
Yeah.
I think we immediately, especially guitar players, because we're all like dinosaurs And is it nitro? It better be nitro for the tone,
Right.
And it's got traditional PAFs.
Yeah.
Like we're dinosaurs in some ways, and so we look at things and it's like that's different than what I'm used to, and I probably won't be able to figure it out. And I think that's probably not. That perception is not helped by the fact that the people who tend to gravitate towards those type of guitars tend to be more technical players, and less, guys like me. I don't, I think that's just the perception is that you must have to be really good in order to play one or something like that, but it's not true. So
not at all.
No, I mean, I think
you can play 12 bar blues on that.
Yeah. I think, so you mentioned two other builders, Strandberg and Ormsby, who I have an incredible amount of respect for, and the fact that my guitars are amongst the multi-scales that you've selected, that means a lot. But since you mentioned those guys, I think we can have a conversation about what a player can expect from multi-scale. Because if you were to pick up a Strandberg and an Ormsby and one of mine, you would find some very different experiences.
Definitely.
And part of it has to do with the styling, the body styling. I mean, obviously the Strandberg is headless, and it's got these, it's kind of radical cutaways. If you do your homework with Strandberg, he's got a website that's kind of hard to find. There's like the main Strandberg website that's like the store, but he's got another website that what's it called? The Strandbergs. I'll tell you later, and you can post it. We can post it on the Facebook or something.
Yeah, we'll
like
put
that.
it in the show notes.
But basically what he did was, for several years before Strandberg kind of went real-time, full-time, public offering kind of thing, he was sort of dabbling, and he was Ola Strandberg, and he had this blog where he was posting all of his experiments with things.
Oh, cool.
And so he was an engineer. He was a CNC guy, and so he had access to all these tools and everything like that. But the first thing he did was he took a Strat and he reshaped it to be ergonomic. Because if you're gonna ergonomicize something, the first thing that you really need to do is change the neck angle. To be more steep, kind of more pointed towards your shoulder, and traditional shapes like Strats and LPs, they sit on your leg one way or the other, and they don't really fall into a place that allows that neck projection that kind of goes up over your shoulder in a way that you bring your hand up comfortably too.
Are you trying to tell me that me wearing my guitar at my knees is not ergonomic? Because Tim Armstrong would beg to differ.
There's something about the tone, though.
Right.
It's not being deadened on your belly anymore, right?
I don't know. I've always had my guitars way too low, and it's probably a detriment to everyone. But
thanks, punk rock.
Yeah, that's right.
But Strandberg, he started experimenting with basically a Strat shape, and if you look at the guitar, it's basically a super Strat with some extra cutaways in the lower bout, and it's headless. It really is a super Strat. If you lay it over a super Strat shape, it's a super Strat.
I have a question about the headless stuff, and maybe I need to get Ola on here to tell me about it. But one thing is it purely an aesthetic choice on his part, or is there a function? I don't understand why you would want a headless guitar, basically.
It totally changes the distribution of weight.
Okay.
So on a 6-string, it might feel, you might not notice a huge difference in a 6-string, but when you go to 7 and 8-string and that headstock keeps getting bigger and more tuners start getting loaded up there, you're going to end up with an instrument that just overall feels more heavy and more neck heavy. And the headless design completely removes that. And the Ned Steinberger, right? Yes.
Those two get me. Yes, Steinberger. Yes, Steinberger. Wait, who?
Yeah,
they both
but
did
in the
kind
80s,
of the what?
Those that kind of like delta wing shape kind of thing, and that was very minimalist, but that was super. Those were super light, So it changes if you want to go towards ergonomic, and like Steve Klein built some guitars like that too, that are that kind of weird kind of teardrop thin kind of shape that sits in your lap really comfortably, where you don't have to be wrestling it with your hand. Just like all the weight is in the instrument and it's in front of you, and there's no weight out on the end swinging around out there. There are going to be some tonal changes too, because the headstock does create something of a counterweight and changes the way the neck frequencies affect the tone. And I've seen some laser interferometry, where you take these measurements and measure like these super fine micro frequency vibrations, and you can see it in like a.
I didn't know that was a thing, and now I want to try it with so many things.
Yeah. No, but the you start getting into like really super nerdy guitar and instrument acoustics, and you start finding out that like even your Explorer here has a very specific sound signature because of the shape, and because of the way that weights and densities are distributed in its wacky shape.
Really?
Yeah. So
because I've always been that guy that's like, if it's I know that different guitars sound different. Like every guitar player knows that.
Yeah.
A Les Paul is not a Les Paul, necessarily. But I've always been under the assumption that, an SG and a Les Paul are going to be pretty close to the same thing. But even the shape of the body and the way things mount up actually changes it. Wow.
I mean, in very minute and very subtle ways, but taking the headstock off of a guitar is gonna change it. But I think Strandberg was mainly doing that for the ergonomic perspective, and then changing all those bout cutaways so they sit on your legs in different ways. So you can sit it in classical position, you can sit it in a traditional, on your right hip kind of position, different ways like that. So Strandberg has a very specific kind of plan, and that is like it's gonna be his mission is to make a more comfortable ergonomic instrument, and that's where that neck shape comes in. It's supposed to reduce tension across your thumb and how your thumb and that grabbing motion. And there's some ergonomic theory about flat facets versus curved facets and things. But it's visually it's pretty radical. I mean, the headless is one thing, and then those extra cutaways and stuff. But you know what? If you look around on Instagram and you search out, especially multiscale makers and people who are doing headless, Strandberg has become the newest, most copied guitar shape.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep. It's
absolutely.
like Strats, Tellys, Les Pauls, and now Strandberg. It's
people are
amazing
definitely copying that,
especially in the last 5 years. It's crazy seeing how many people, if not identical copies, something very, very similar. Like pushing that here and there.
Well, I mean, he's obviously having some success with it. I think, if I'm not remembering incorrectly, I think Sweetwater picked him up recently.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, there's a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. But visually, Strandberg's very striking, and we can get into like the scale splays and stuff like that. But the actual scale splays on Strandberg are pretty conservative in terms of what's out there, and especially So the next company we talked about, Ormsby, Perry's known for basically a super strat shape with a really dramatic multiscale. I mean, even his 6 strings, it's 2 inches splay right away.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is, I think, probably some of the widest. But he also is going back to some of Ralph Novak's original kind of observations about multiscale and like how far do you spread it out. And I read an article where Ralph Novak said, once you reach a scale difference of 2 inches, you start noticing some really interesting things happening with the way that the instrument starts to perform. And so that's where Ormsby starts, 2 inches. And so that's going to feel really different all across the neck, because this frets are splayed and they're tilted in very kind of extreme ways on both ends of the fretboard. My instruments, I'm probably a little bit more close to Strandberg in terms of like the being conservative and like how far things are spread, and the way that I lay out the frets is also is different than both of those companies. So
You know what we should do? You know what we should do before we get too far ahead of ourselves? There's some people who this might be the first time they've heard about this.
Yeah.
So maybe we should explain the like to a fifth grader, like I would require. Like, what is the entire point? Like, why do this at all?
Yeah, we're kind of skirting around that, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I have a variety of lengths of elevator speeches. Like, are you going up 2 floors? Are you going up 20 floors?
I mean, we got time. We can go as many floors as you think it would take.
The really quick explanation that I give to people at guitar shows is the basic idea with most multiscale guitarists is that you are adding length to the bass side. And when you add that length, you add a little bit more tension. It provides a little bit more kind of snap and pop to your tone. It also, a longer string also has more harmonic component. So it's going to be a more interesting sound. And so on a 6-string, playing the frets like that, multiscale, it's cool. It sounds good. It really shines though as soon as you start drop tuning it, because now you drop down a step. You see, if you're going to even if you're doing a drop D, just like standard tuning drop D, that 6-string now still feels good. It feels excellent. You don't notice any major loss in tension and flabbiness or anything like that. And if you wanted to go like full-time drop D on an instrument, you wouldn't need to do any sort of string changes. You wouldn't need to have like a heavy bottom set or something like that. Even if you were to do, like the Genty popular drop C, so everything's down a step and then drop the 6-string to a C.
That's what I put this in for quite a while. It's standard now, but
yeah, and those are 11s on there, right?
Yeah,
and it doesn't feel too like floppy and loosey.
No, in fact, I wanted to go lower, but I was like, I think I need bigger strings to go low.
But you might only need to do like a heavy bottom set though. You might not even need to go to 12s, or it's like String Joy does like half sets, right? Like 11.5s or something like that. Yeah, like even something like that would probably work really well. So as soon as you start drop tuning a multiscale instrument, you start realizing like, oh, it still sounds awesome. And I'm not losing a lot of feel to it here. And if I have to do any string gauge changes, they're minor. As soon as you start going to 7 and 8 string, though, you want the low pitches want a longer scale in order to vibrate in a way that has fullness of tone and has a good feel, and so that it's equal across. So if you go to 7 string to 8 string, you want to have extra length there. Otherwise, you do have to compensate with really wildly ridiculous string gauge sets, and that only works to a certain point. If you start going to like 13s or more on a short scale instrument, you start running into tuning problems with each string within itself.
It's so funny that you bring that up, because you brought up String Joy. I was talking to Scott the other day, and he routinely, because he does so many custom sets and things like that, he gets wild requests that he's like, has to be like, I'll sell you that, but it's not going to work. Yeah. He's always getting like these guys who want to do extended range, like shorter than standard scale stuff, and it's like he's like, that's not going to do what you think it's going to do. And it's interesting that how many people are trying to do that.
There's this thing that happens, it's called inharmonicity, where the string, you may be able to intonate it open, you do your open and you do your 12th fret harmonic, and then you intonate it at the 12th fret by playing it, and everything's fine. But as soon as you actually start chording things, it's out of tune, because the strings are out of tune with themselves, because they're so thick they cannot vibrate along their full length.
Right.
They're actually
not a long enough scale length.
Yeah. Okay. So when you start adding that length to those low strings, you start getting the scale lengths that those pitches need to be able to really speak and to be able to be in tune as well. So if you were to walk up to a Jayemar, a Strandberg, and an Ormsby on the wall in a shop and look at them, there would be a couple things that you'd want to think about right away. The first thing is, what are the scale lengths chosen? And so multiscale means each string has a different scale unto itself. But the way that we do it when we build them is that we choose a treble side, so the high string, and we choose a bass side, low string scale. And you kind of connect the dots between them, right? So my guitars, I go for a 6-string, I go 25 inches on the treble side, so that's like a PRS scale, and then a 26 on the bass, so that's half an inch longer than a Fender scale length. So already you can start to kind of get an idea about what each end of the fretboard, or which side of the fretboard is going to sound like. So that half an inch more than a Fender scale, that's going to be something that you're going to feel, and you're going to hear it, and you're going to hear it in more sort of like a kind of a boomy kind of tone, and kind of a snappier and kind of quicker kind of feel to it. I think it's excellent. Strandberg uses 25 to 25 and a half. So going from PRS to Fender,
Right.
all within the same thing right there. Like I said before, Ormsby going 25 and a half to 27 and a half right away. And so that right there is going to give you some options for like what kind of playability do I want to hear? Not that. I mean, we've got people who play 35-inch 5-string basses. Like
Right.
Yeah.
it's like our
Yeah.
fingers can handle a lot. If you're talking about someone playing an upright bass, your finger spread is able to handle a lot. It's just how much do you want in relation to everything else that's in that package.
Do you change the spread of the scales? Does it change based on what you start? Like, for instance, like if you start with like a 27-inch scale on the treble side, do you change the actual ratio, or do you stick with that 1 inch on like a 6-string?
So my guitars, the bridge bass design requires that my scale lengths are always 1 inch difference.
Okay.
So one of your listeners on the Facebook page asked, "Can you do baritone?" And so
That was
yes.
Dustin. Shout out to
Yes.
Dustin.
So I could build something that would, it depends on what you want to use for your bass scale for a baritone. Is it 27 or 28? So if it was 28 on the bass side, it would have to be 27 on the treble side.
Gotcha.
If it was a 27-inch on the bass, it would have to be 26 on the treble side. So my bridges have to have a specific scale difference built into it.
Gotcha.
Other builders who do individual bridges, you can do whatever you want and add however you need it. So the next thing that you would look at when you're looking at those 3 guitars hanging on the wall, you'd find your scale difference, and the scales that you get tell you something about that playability and something about the tone. The longer the scale, you're going to get more of that kind of bigger sound. A friend of mine named Kevin, he borrowed the twin to this one, the walnut topped one that you guys played at the Coast Show there. He borrowed it for a while, and he's just like, I keep getting this feeling that I'm playing a baritone, but I'm not. It's in standard tuning, but the tone is that kind of big, round sound, that really snappy, poppy tone that you get from a baritone. And he's like, I love that, but it's it's just half of an inch. It's all it's doing it. The next thing that you would see on these instruments is what's called the neutral fret. So you don't have to have one fret that's perpendicular to the center line, but most people do, and it's it can vary quite a lot. So I put my neutral fret at the 12th fret. So what this does is it creates like a zone of sort of straight frettedness around it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go upstream, downstream about 3 to 5 frets, you're going to find the most kind of normal feeling area. I found my first guitar, I did put the neutral fret at the 7th fret, and I found that it was fine until I started getting up into the like above the 15th fret.
Okay.
And then the rotation of the frets over.
Because they start going the other way.
Yeah,
right? Mhm.
yeah. So instead of rotating away from you, they're rotating for you. And I found that my hand was needing to kind of stack up and crunch up in a funny way. So I said, okay, from here on out, I'm going to put the neutral at the 12th fret. And so that makes that area around the 15 and the 17 more straight than if that straight fret was farther downstream. If it was at the 7th, the 9th, or something like that. On the Strandberg guitar, the perpendicular fret is at the 0.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah, it's at the nut. So everything falls towards you.
So it almost feels like it doesn't really have one because you're not ever going to get to it, basically.
Yeah. You never have the strings falling or the frets falling away from you. They're always rotating towards you. And I think I'm not really sure why he chose to do that. The only thing I can guess is that it might have something to do with actual manufacturing of the body, because the way that the body where the bridge connects is angled, and I think I don't know that makes it sound trivial that you would make a manufacturing choice for like a layout of a very, very specific and intentional kind of system, but it might be. I don't know. It's only half an inch of splay,
right?
So that's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
On his 7 strings, the neutral fret is at the 10.
Okay.
So I mean, he does move it around. On the 8 strings, the neutral fret's at the 7th. On the Ormsby, he always puts the neutral fret at the 9th.
No matter what.
No matter what. And so he's got some consistency going on there, because his treble side is always 25.5, and he adds, I think it's like 0.3 to 0.2 to the bass side, so somewhere around like 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch for the 6 to 7 to 8, because the 6 to the 8th string, the spread doesn't change that much. So that's kind of like when you're looking at multiscales, and I think this is the thing that's really interesting and really exciting about multiscale, is that there are so many more builders and companies doing multiscale, and you have a lot of options for scales, for scale difference, and for neutral fret location, all of which kind of plays into how you might want to kind of style your playing and your tone.
You mentioned, can we go back for just a second? You mentioned that you don't have to have a neutral fret, but most people do. Is that because you want to have some straight frettedness on the guitar, or why would you choose to not have one if for those that don't have one?
I think it's just kind of like reference. I mean, that actually might be a manufacturing reference point.
Okay.
Just having a good kind of with I can tell you from building my guitars, where there are so few things that are perpendicular to the center line, it really is nice to have one thing that's just straight,
right? So you can reference it. Yeah.
Everything else is asymmetrical on my instruments. It's sometimes I spend a lot of time with rulers and with, like, you've seen on my Instagram page, like my layout with a laser level.
Yeah.
I mean, I spend a lot of time working on that center line to be true, because it's so hard to just look at it and see it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, it could be anywhere. It seems like there is a trend towards more builders putting the neutral fret at the 9th fret. That is on a 24 fret instrument. That is basically exactly in the middle of the fretboard.
Oh, okay.
But in my experience, that wasn't the issue. It wasn't the issue of like creating this, sort of like symmetrical splaying of the frets. My experience was on that first guitar was that in the low positions, it's not a big deal. It's like reaching to that on my 7 strings, I go 25.5 to 27. So playing a 27-inch scale and reaching down to the first 3 frets isn't a big deal. Your hand is going to spread out a little bit more, but
Right.
it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What I found was that it's that cascading of the frets towards you in the upper 15 to 19 fret range that was really bizarre.
Yes.
And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to shift it down. Coach Schneider told me, he said, use the ladder example. So I did a podcast interview with him on one of his podcasts. But he was asking me like how he's like, and he had one of my guitars with the One Day Show, and he's like, explain this whole neutral fret to me. And I said, well, imagine if you had a ladder, a really wonky ladder, where on the left side of the ladder, you had the rungs spread far apart. And on the right side of the ladder, you had the rungs closer together. So it looked like this radial kind of fan kind of thing, right? And imagine that you could change the ladder's angles by moving the straight pieces up and down.
Okay.
Right? You can kind of parallelogram them so that they go up and down. So let's say that you wanted to work on your siding on the bottom of your house. So you put the ladder up against your house with the 2 feet resting flat on the floor. On the ground, you step onto the first rung and it's straight. And then it kind of starts angling as you go up. But that's okay. You're going to work down here. You're going to work down low. So you've got this mostly straight area.
Right.
But now tomorrow you need to work on the top window of the first floor. So you prop up one side. So now the middle of the ladder has a straight rung because that's where you're going to be doing most of your work. You go stand up there. It's going to be kind of weird getting up to it. But once you're there, you're going to work on your window up there and it's going to be kind of straight. But now later on, you need to work on the gutter. So you make the top of the ladder even with the gutter. It's going to be really wonky getting up there because down at the ground, it's really, really angled.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you get up to the top, it's totally straight and it's going to be okay. So that's kind of like, I don't know if that visual works for you, but I threw that out for him and he's like, okay. So wherever that neutral fret is, and wherever that neutral rung is, you get the most straightedness around it.
Right.
Yeah.
And the things uphill and downhill from that, or on a guitar, downhill, lower and uphill, higher, those things, that's where you start getting a little bit more angle. How bad is the angle? How much is it going to really mess up your work? It depends. Will you get used to it? Probably.
Right.
So kind of what I'm taking away from it is basically when you do your straight fret at the 12th fret, you get a more even fan across both ways.
You get more even straightedness in the upper registers where the frets are closer together. And you don't want anything messing with that. When you're trying to do intricate stuff, whether you're doing, scale runs across the fretboard or where you're doing chords up, if you're trying to like fret chords in the 15th to 19th fret range.
Right.
It ain't easy.
Not a whole lot of people do, but if you do that, you don't want anything to make that harder for you.
No.
Yeah, I'm just imagining if like you were trying to do a bar chord, but the frets were tilted.
Yeah.
At that stage, it
Yeah.
would be almost impossible.
Yeah. It starts getting kind of funky. So I put it at the 12th to allow upper fret access to be less weird.
Yeah, because like you were saying, playing down low on a guitar, that's not that big of a deal if the frets are at a different angle.
Yeah.
I want to bring up one other thing too that I think is sometimes a misconception about Multiscale. Strandberg made his guitars, and that's like his slogan and everything like that. It's all about the ergonomics, and he's designed the Multiscale to go with that. Ormsby, I've heard him say that there is some ergonomic considerations in the way that he chose his scales and his neutral fret. I think that there are people, and I know this because because when I go to guitar shows and people walk up to the table, sometimes you'll see some friends walked up to the table and one person has never seen multiscale before and they're like, "What's going on there?" And the other friend goes, "Oh, they're rotated, they're fanned out there. It's all ergonomic. So like the way that your wrist rotates like this."
Mm-hmm.
And so there are people out there who think multiscale is ergonomic first and foremost.
That was my first
And
perception of it.
I don't think so. Like if you, I think if you wanted to create, if you wanted to make a checklist of things that you'd want to do on a guitar to be ergonomic, I don't think the first thing would be, yep, ergonomic needs to be there. The multiscale needs to be there for ergonomics. I think neck projection, neck angle being more like a classical position and making that easier to do would be your first thing. And if you look at some like very specific ergonomic things like the Strandberg, like the Klein guitar, like my friend Michael Sankey in Ottawa, they're very much, or like Rick Toon, where's Rick now? Is he in New Jersey? If you look at these guitars, they completely throw away this idea of what the traditional guitar looks like, and their body shapes are only for ergonomics, and it's how is it going to sit on your leg, on your lap, and have that neck projection in a way that allows you to just sit there and play it without the guitar falling over. You don't have to like have a strap in a certain way. You don't have to be holding it up with your hand and playing it at the same time. It's just there. I think multiscale can go along with that because multiscale can offer some things in terms of the other direction. Like for example, you mentioned Michael Sankey. The first time that he built a multi-scale guitars, he had a jazz player, come to him and say, "I want a 7-string, but I want short scale." And he went, "You're not going to get what we were talking about earlier, right?"
Yeah.
He's like, "That's not going to work for you." He says, "But I've been thinking about this thing called multi-scale that I want to try out. Let me see what I can do." So what he ended up doing was he ended up, instead of starting with a familiar standard scale on the treble side, like 25 or 25 and a half, he started with that on the bass side. And I think what he ended up doing was something like 25 and a half on the bass side to 24 on the treble side. And this was because this guy did have some repetitive motion issues. He had some wrist injuries, and he wanted the short scale to make it easier to play. So by making the treble side smaller and making it finger splay less, I think that he ended up getting that ergonomic benefit. But when you're talking about most multi-scales adding 1 to 2 inches of splay on the bass side, if you think about the way your hand, like you put your hand out, like give me 5, right? Now, someone said on the side, but if you did on the side where your thumb was rotating out,
right,
that starts getting, that's where your hand starts going. The farther that you have to reach, the more that you have to splay out your fingers for longer scale frets.
I wonder how many of the listeners did just what we were doing.
I don't know.
As soon as you said that, I was like, "What? Oh yeah, that's not comfortable."
Yeah, but I mean, that's what multi-scale is going to. If you're adding a lot of length to the bass side, that's what your hand does in those first 3 frets. Is that you've got to rotate your hand out more, and that's not comfortable. So if anything, multi-scale could be potentially exacerbating it if you have injuries,
right?
So,
Depending on how extreme and blah, all the other specs too.
So when I see people step up to my table at guitar shows and say, "Oh yeah, it's for ergonomics," you don't want to like insult people. You say yes, and
right,
it adds, and then I give them my elevator speech, and they go, "Oh yeah." I had a guy at the Rose Quarter show just recently here. It was 2 friends, but one was very knowledgeable and learned in the multi-scale because he plays a Dingwall bass.
Oh, okay.
And Dingwall basses are like, they go from like 34 to 37 inches on the...
Good grief.
Wow.
And he's like, "No, it's not about ergonomics. It's not going to help your hand." He's like, it's all about tone, and it's all about, just harmonics and everything just sounding better, in these low, and they they were in a band together, and they play, prog metal and stuff, and they tune down, and he's like, yeah, I tuned that 5th string down to a low A, and it sounds glorious. And it's just like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, man. So don't look at a multiscale and be like, well, there's nothing wrong with my hands. I don't need ergonomics. Why would I do that? Go explore multiscale. Go find out more about it because it can do things for your tone, and it can do things for your tone if you like drop tuning, if you like extended range.
Oh, and I do.
Do things. Like baritone, for example. Going back to the idea of the baritone, if you don't like the idea of, if you were going to do a 27 or a 28-inch scale, if you don't like the idea of the treble strings being at that length, well, guess what? Multiscale can give you the lower end and still have a relatively playable high end. And I think that there are enough builders out there doing enough of a difference of scale choices, scale difference, neutral fret, and body styling that I think that you can find what you're looking for. I very, very much chose not to make something that looks like a Strat or a Les Paul. There are enough people doing that, and I think the asymmetrical body styles work very much with the asymmetrical bridge placement and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I agree.
And
I was just looking at my Les Paul one, thinking that would look funny if it was multiscale. Like it would look kind of weird.
Yeah. So it's possible, but you'd have to decide if that's the aesthetic that you want. So it's definitely go check out, and if there are Strandbergs at Sweetwater or Guitar Center or something like that, go take one off a wall and just sit down for a couple minutes and check it out, because it is about tone. It is about exploring new. Really, it sounds cheesy to say. It's like a new frontiers of tone with different scale lengths and different combinations, and and pickups respond differently to multiscale with like different harmonic content of the string. It's pretty cool.
I'm just diving back into the Facebook group real quick to make sure we didn't miss anybody's questions. And this might it's not obviously something that you do, but you might know something about it. Corey Nigro wants to know about the guitars with the squiggly frets.
Oh right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
I've not played one of those. But they are a cool adaptation to the guitar neck, the way, and you can do them with or without multiscale. The idea is that you are creating more perfect intonation for each string.
Yeah.
And with the Western equal temperament scale, almost everything except for like the octave and the fifth, almost everything is out of tune a little bit, so that it can be in tune with everything else. Because the natural sequence of overtones does not work well with playing in a lot of different keys. And I was like, there's a whole bunch of musical history for that. In Bach's time, the well-tempered clavier was like, somebody came up with this thing called equal temperament, so you could play in all keys. And so he's like, this is cool. I'm going to write music in all keys now, to demonstrate and to prove that it was possible. Otherwise, there was something called just intonation before that, and just intonation sounds really amazing. And I hear, because it follows the natural sequence of overtones, and everything is more in tune, and it sounds more just sonorous and beautiful and consonant. And apparently the true temperament frets allow you to do that more closer. But it is pretty crazy looking.
It looks really weird.
And yeah, somebody mentioned, like, I hate to be the tech doing the luthier doing the fret job on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you do. I don't know.
You think they just replace them?
I think you just replace them. I've not actually looked into that, but I would not.
Hey, I need a refret job on this.
Let me get my file. wait a minute.
That'll be $6,000.
because I mean, I don't know.
Here's a new neck.
Right.
Because you actually have to, when you order those things, I think you have to tell them like what string gauge you're planning to use. It's
Interesting.
like based on that.
Wow.
I might be wrong on that, but when you look at guitars, when you look at guitars that like multiple guitars that have this, the squigglies aren't the same on every of them.
Right.
They're different. They're adaptive to the scale and the tuning and the strings that you're going to use.
I wonder how much that would throw me off, if at all. And now I'm wondering if it would at all. Maybe not. Like,
well, that's what I thought too. Is like that looks way more intimidating than a multi-scale fan fret.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not.
Maybe it's fine. I don't.
Yeah.
I've never played one.
So also mentioned in the Facebook group, Per Nilsson, who is now playing with Meshuggah. He plays his Strandberg signature guitar with
True temperament.
temperament scale, and I think they use Evo the gold fret wire for that. So it's going to have a much longer play life,
right,
than your standard nickel silver. But yeah, it's pretty funky looking. But I mean, I also have people come to my table, at guitar shows and be like, "Can I bend a note? Is it gonna work?" It's just like, yeah, I do it, and they're like, "It bends the same." It's like because bending is more of like a tension thing than an actual like displacement of the fret or anything.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you watch Per Nilsson play his true temperament thing, and he's just like he's not having any trouble with it. He can get vibrato. He can do like steep bends and all that kind of stuff, and it just sounds cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's crazy.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the multi-scale aspect of your guitars, and I keep forgetting and having to ask you, but like, let's talk about the pickups that are in this one that I've got.
Oh, right.
Those are wild.
So I wind my own pickups, and that's talk about going down rabbit holes, man. So when I was building this first 7-string, I was like, okay, I've got a 7-string. I'm doing multi-scale. I want the pickups to be angled. Damn, that's going to be expensive.
Right.
Like basically, I probably would have spent almost twice as much on pickups than I did on the whole rest of the guitar. Because I used a lot of like really just secondhand kind of salvaged wood and stuff to build that. So I just said, okay, what does it take to do this? And I researched it, and that first set, they work. They don't sound great. I kind of found out that I did a lot of things wrong with like putting a lot of metal in them because they're blade pickups, and I basically just went to Home Depot and got some 3/4 inch soft steel, use them for the blade cores. And I've got a friend in Portland named David King who builds basses, headless basses, and he also winds his own pickups and stuff like that. And he's like, oh man, why'd you go and do that? It's gonna sound muddy as hell get out. And they did. It was unfortunate. They're super hot, but like there's no clarity to them. So this next set was what's in this black maple one is that I wanted to seek out clarity, like something very sparkly. Go for, I was listening to a lot of Periphery at the time, and Periphery has this very, very mid-range, very crispy kind of tone. Without being like, it's not like Dimebag Darrell fuzzy type stuff. It's very articulate. And so I started researching like what kind of things do you do? Well, ceramic magnets make pickups very crispy. And then blades. Blades can also give you some clarity, especially with an angled pickup like that. And then I was like, what else? And so like a thinner wire gauge, that'll work. And then there's a guy in New York named David Schwab who makes bass pickups with neodymium rare earth magnets. I'm like, that's interesting.
There you go.
All right, so I threw. I was like, these are basically kitchen sinks, like everything in the kitchen sink pickups, because they've got slug bobbin with, I can't remember which one the wires on. I think it's like slugs with 42 gauge with neodymiums and blades with 43 gauge and ceramic magnets. So it's just like, it's like ridiculous stuff that shouldn't sound good together. It should just be like ice picks or something like that. But they ended up turning out like very kind of articulate, mid-rangey, modern metal kind of pickups.
Yeah.
I like them a lot.
They sound awesome. to
Yeah.
me.
I was like, man, this is just like so clear, like, but not ice picky.
Well,
Yeah.
good.
You know, so
Yeah.
I'm
It's
glad.
clear, but it's not shrill.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I made them and was like, this is going to be interesting. We'll see what happens. Well, I mean, that's another thing that David King said, because I did go to him for some advice on some things, and he's like, here's what I can tell you. You're going to make some pickups. They're going to sound like pickups. You're going to think they sound great. Are they going to sound like anything else that's out there? Maybe, probably not. But as long as your soldering is good, as long as you pot them, as long as you like do the things that you're supposed to do to construct a pickup, it's going to sound like a pickup.
Right.
And it did, and that's a good thing. And it actually turned out okay. And I might use that recipe again because it worked out. But
It
no,
did. It worked out.
I'm not even really sure why. Like, if I changed any, I'm afraid to change anything if I wound them again. Like, I don't know what would happen. Like, if I changed if I put more or less wire on them, I'm not sure what that would do.
I was actually wondering what it would sound like, because I generally prefer things that don't have a ton of output most of the time. These actually do, and I do like them.
Yeah.
I was wondering what it would sound like, or feel like rather, with a little less winding on it. I wonder if it would be a little more in my normal camp. Like,
It might be. I might if I was going to do anything, I would probably back off by like 500 turns on each coil, just to just be incremental. About 500 turns is about as much as you can take off, or as little as you can take off, and have some noticeable changes.
Right.
With pickups and stuff. But pickups are fun to make. I mean, every guitar I have has a pickup or pickups that are tailored to that instrument. I mean, it's specific to that instrument and the sound that I wanted to, or I imagine getting out of it. The 8-string that you saw on my table, I was listening to a lot of Meshuggah, and I found on YouTube, Keith Merrow did a humbucker pickup shootout of like 15 Seymour Duncan pickups.
Wow.
And if you have the time, I think it's like 20 minutes long. If you have the time with like good speakers or earbuds, just listen to it straight through and like make a numbered list, and maybe make like a little simple system of things that you like or you don't like. Like a smiley face or a frowny face or a check or like an X or something like that. And I was listening to that, and I came upon the Seymour Duncan Nazguls, which is just like an awesome name for a pickup.
yes, it is.
And the Nazgul has like this, it's just this wonderful saturated sound, like very, very granular kind of tone, with the harmonics, like doing that kind of quick palm muting that kind of blooms. You know what I'm talking about? And I was just like, oh my God, that's so tasty. It's like, how do I do that? So you can actually reverse engineer a lot of the pickups that companies are making, because they oftentimes give the wire type and the magnet type.
Right.
And the output.
And the output, yeah.
And there are these online coil estimator calculators where you can like put in some factors and stuff like that. And I came pretty close. A friend who plays, he's very into Meshuggah. He plays very heavy, big amps and guitars, and he actually has a guitar. He has a Man-S guitar with that pickup in it, the Nazgul in it, and he played them side by side. And he's like, "Dude, you got pretty close."
Nice.
Yes,
That's awesome.
Nice. Well, is there anything else before we wrap this thing up that you want to, any real important things for the listeners to take away, or things that you wanted to say, or anything about? It doesn't even have to be about guitars. It can be about life.
About life
or whatever.
I don't know. This is not a full-time thing for me. This is my 20th year as a middle school band and choir teacher, and guitar building is something that I really enjoy. it is the thing that I pour my creative juices into. I mean, obviously my students and the music in the classroom, I put a lot of energy into too. But it's just such a different kind of way of
More of the passion.
Yeah. I don't know. It's
Well, you're creating something versus teaching something. That's two different, positions.
That I find them both very important. I don't in any way believe that I'm going to compete with. I don't think that I will ever have a Jayemar next to a Strandberg and an Ormsby in a guitar shop.
That would be awesome.
Cool. But I don't think so. I mean, I'm not going to blanket the world with my instruments. I believe that I have something to offer in terms of the aesthetics and the functionality that I offer on my guitars. But I don't really think that I'm going to be able to compete on a level, especially doing this, part-time on the side. I do hope that I can get some guitars out there and put them in the hands of players that will find them to be useful musical tools. And if I can help them get closer to the sound that they're looking for, with pickups, as part of the package, I really want to be able to do more of that. 2019 was a little bit slow for me. I'm hoping 2020 will be a little bit better.
Flood him with orders.
But I do need to. I also need to remember to maintain that balance of job and shop time. And I also do have a wife and a daughter,
Right.
I love very much, and need to make sure that I'm spending a good balance of time with them as well. I said 2019 was a little bit slow, but I'm in a happy place. I feel like I've made some adjustments to my design and some parameters and to the build process to make it a little bit more accurate and a little bit more consistent and a little bit more safe and a little bit more just kind of flow a bit better. The work process, the build process from raw wood to finished instruments. I do build guitars only out of domestic and local hardwoods, so no exotics, nothing from outside the lower 48. That's something that I hope I can intrigue some people on. They think like, oh wow, this is built with wood that only came from Oregon. Mm-hmm. That is for environmentally conscious people. I think that's an important thing. It's a lot of fun. It's fun coming here and talking with you guys about more of this stuff, because it's like finding people that really geek out on that kind of stuff and want to know the details and find a lot of pleasure in those details.
Well, you just talked to a few thousand of them, so
Yeah.
there you go.
I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, this was a good time. Well, you already answered the boss pedal question, and I already know the answer to your pizza question, but nobody else does.
I'm
So
not sure I do.
what kind of pizza are you?
I showed up at Blake's door with a DiGiorno's Rising Crust pizza.
And he didn't kick you out?
That's what I get when I go to the frozen food section. But if I'm eating out, go to Lucky Lab. They have something called the dog breath. Do they still have the dog breath on the?
I haven't been there in so long.
Been there.
It's basically just like a pizza that's covered with several cloves of garlic, and it's
hence the name.
I
like
amazing.
it.
I'm into it. I love it.
You're feeling it and tasting it for like a day or two.
I have to admit something though. I've actually never eaten a DiGiorno pizza, so this is going to be a very.
I brought you the 4 cheese because I know that you like to doctor them up and put some special sausage on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do that.
I'm going to go to Sheridan later. I have a gift card from Christmas.
Oh,
I'm going to
that's
get
a
me
Merry Christmas.
some pizza sausage, and I'll
Sausage.
sprinkle it on there. I bet it's going to be good.
I bet it is.
Well, thanks so much for coming on and educating all of us. That was a really good conversation, and I think it definitely helped me understand kind of the whole process behind it, because I've definitely been that guy that was like, it's for ergonomics. I've definitely been that guy before. So
Yeah.
always good to learn and try new things. Try new things, kids. It's
Yeah.
good for you.
It's
All
good
right.
for your tone.
That's good for your tone. Okay, got anything else, Jess?
It's always a pleasure talking to Jason. Every time I see him at a show, I'm like, oh yeah, sweet. I get to talk to somebody, to a cool guy.
Yeah,
So,
I didn't know you were at that show, so that
it's-
was like, oh, sweet, he's here. I wish we didn't find him at the
It's
very
always-
end of the show.
Always a good time talking to you and learning more about these. And seriously, your work is right up there with the best of them. So
Oh, geez, thanks.
I
Definitely.
really enjoy your stuff, and I hope other people get to play your guitars.
Well, thank you.
So
All right, sounds good. So for Jess and Jason, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, folks, there you have it. Hopefully you have a better understanding of the whole multiscale thing like I do now. I'm still not an expert, obviously, but it makes a lot more sense to me now. And if you want more audio content for your ears, please slide over to Patreon and consider helping the show out over there. I'm posting extra audio content every week, and it's just $5 a month to get access to that. And if you could do that, that would be so helpful. As a matter of fact, this week I'll be posting a couple audio projects I worked on recently for people to critique and make fun of me and whatever else they want to do. So yeah, check that out if that's your thing. And please don't forget to share this with a friend, family, coworker, anybody you think might like some of this nerdery. Please share it. That's what this whole big thing relies on, is you sharing with a friend and telling people how much you enjoy this podcast, whether online or offline or whatever. So if you could share this with one person, that would be wonderful. So yeah, thank you very much. I'll see you on the interwebs later. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.